Hello, ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, innies, outies, and of course in betweeners. My name's Dan and welcome back to another PAP Reports. It's Monday, June the 15th, 2020, and I'd like to start today with a genuine heartfelt thank you to everyone who reached out to me to wish me well after the other week's little incident. I was genuinely blown away by the support from you all and never imagined I would receive so many messages to see if I was okay. I'm only sorry that I couldn't reply to you all individually, but please accept this as a personal thank you for your support. I was honestly touched. My mental health issues can normally be hidden by editing, but the reason I left that in the last video, what had happened, was because I simply couldn't explain it in the video, why I had suddenly become a bit stuttery and looked a bit off. So for me, it was simply easier to leave that bit in, then you could see why I had suddenly changed on camera. My intention was to be in the comments that evening, but I simply didn't feel any better, and so please forgive me for not responding to you personally. But if you commented, I promise I did read every single comment. Okay, let's get into it. Better police training is being called for after a 35-year-old Lambeth councillor revealed that he had allegedly been stopped and searched at least 60 times since he was 13, saying that it was almost always because police assumed he was a drug dealer. 6'4" Mohammed Hashi said that one of the worst things about being stopped is that he's always put in handcuffs and left feeling that if he was white, he wouldn't have been stopped in the first place. No offence intended, but white people do also get stopped all the time as well. Mr. Hashi recalled the most recent incident, which happened in August last year, 10 months ago, which is by far an improvement in his record. As if he was stopped 60 times over 22 years, that's almost 3 times a year, and so far he's only been stopped once in the past 10 months. So to be fair, it seems like this is, like a lot of stories coming out recently, is being used to help strengthen the racism claims being made by many people. Now let me be clear, I know there are people out there who have issues with black people, gay people, those of certain religions, etc. And unfortunately that's never ever going to change. But with the right education, more people can learn to be more accepting. But I just think that the issue of making it all about race certainly doesn't help. I hear people saying things like all lives don't matter until black lives matter, or we are all one race, the human race, whilst at the same time making it all about the fact that black people are being discriminated against. But if that's so, then what about the lives of young white girls who were abused? Their lives matter too. The victims of all ethnicities that are affected by terrorism, their lives matter. The people who are starving and homeless because the government has failed them, again, of all ethnicities, their lives matter as well. Making it all about one of the protected characteristics whilst claiming that we're all one race and should all be treated with respect, or that no other life matters until black lives matters, seems to me to defeat the object. I don't believe in racism, homophobia, transphobia, or any of the rest of them. I believe there is discrimination across the board towards everyone for one reason or another. Even I've been discriminated against, and while this type of thing is going on, businesses are going to be afraid to be labelled as racist, and so will discriminate against white folk in order to hire BAME folk, which then makes it more about colour rather than ability. And that's clearly not to say that BAME people don't have the ability. I mean, look how many successful black and minority people there are. I'm certainly not a surgeon or a doctor, but many are from the BAME community. Clearly, people from every walk of life have the opportunity to be successful. But I think this is going to have a detrimental effect rather than making the country more inclusive. Now, I know this is a tough and sensitive subject. Some of you will agree with me and some of you won't, and that is absolutely fine. But rather than name calling because you don't agree with me or someone else, how about doing the right thing? The thing that actually backs up the supposed BLM movement, core message, and discuss it in an appropriate manner rather than going on the defensive. Mr. Hashi said the protests are useful because they show us how much deep feeling there is in our community, but we need an outlet for that feeling that leads to real change. He said, what I want to see is better training of the police and for the community to be more involved in mechanisms that hold them to account. He says, I'm pleased that some elements of the police are making sure their recruits meet the community as part of their training. We need our police to be more representative of the black community as well. Now, I kind of disagree with that. because that again is making it about race. It's making it about a protected characteristic. The police should be more representative of police. Rather than any particular type of community, the police are meant to be impartial, act with integrity, and treat everyone with respect. Nothing to do with colour of their skin, their religion, or anything else like that. It's more to do with their mental state. Sussex police have had to dip their paws into the public purse in order to pay out £200,000 after they falsely accused and arrested Paul and Elaine Gate. Paul and Elaine were offered an out-of-court settlement after they sued the force. The Gates were arrested after chaos was caused at Gatwick Airport by a drone, after flights were cancelled in droves over a 3-day period as police investigated multiple reported drone sightings. 12 armed police crashed Mr. and Mrs. Gates' home after failing to do any intelligence work in order to find out if they actually owned a drone or if they could have been around at the time of the incident. Just so happens that they didn't own a drone and were not even able to have been the suspects, as they were both at work at the time of the reported sightings. In a statement released by their legal team on Sunday, the couple said, "We are delighted to have finally received vindication. It has been a very long fight for justice. It has taken lengthy legal proceedings to obtain resolution from the police and to finally have closure on this distressing time." Sussex Police Assistant Chief Constable David Miller said he was deeply sorry for the unpleasantness the couple experienced and acknowledged it would have been traumatic. Well, as long as you apologise, that makes it all okay, doesn't it? He added, unfortunately, when the police carry out their functions on behalf of the public, sometimes innocent people are arrested as part of necessary police investigations in the public interest. However, we recognise that things could have been done differently, and as a result, Sussex Police have agreed to pay you compensation and legal costs. 96 people of interest were identified during the investigation. They were researched but ruled out, and as yet, nobody has been charged. 3 stabbings, a rape and a death by suspected drug overdose occurred on Sunday in Manchester after police failed to prevent or break up 2 illegal raves. The raves at Carrington and at Daisy Nook Country Park in Oldham saw around 6,000 people in attendance. The stabbings and rape occurred at the Carrington site and the suspected drugs overdose at the Oldham site. Assistant Chief Constable Chris Sykes said the scale and size of the 2 incidents came on us really quickly and admitted there had been no warning of a rave taking place in Oldham. But after denying that the force was understaffed and claiming they failed to move in to break the raves up in order to prevent people getting hurt, worked out well for you, didn't it? He defended the decision to carefully monitor the gatherings and said police needed to strike the right balance of proportionality and fairness with our overall coronavirus response. How about just sticking to the law? Assistant Chief Constable Sykes said when you're dealing with large crowds, the police moving into those crowds is always a very delicate situation. Although I would suggest that's based more on who the crowd is, considering what's been seen over the past weeks. MPs Angela Rayner and Kate Green both claimed that Greater Manchester Police did not have the officers available to safely prevent the events. A post shared on Greater Manchester Police's Facebook page last week warned of a quarantine rave and which would break coronavirus guidance on meeting in groups. It read, "We are aware of a planned rave in the local area. This has not been authorised. Therefore, it is illegal. With the current climate relating to coronavirus, it is a concern that people are still thinking of attending this rave. Any persons found at the rave or walking to the location will be challenged and directed out of the area." When asked why police didn't stop people gathering at either Daisy Nook or Carrington, Assistant Chief Constable Sykes said, "It's not about what we allow, it's about how we respond to things that take place." Proving once again that police are less interested in crime prevention and more interested in dealing with incidents after the fact, which unfortunately means more victims of crime. Police in Scarborough clearly have very little to do recently, as they took to shutting down a shop that had opened one day early. The Sports Direct store was ordered to close on Sunday after it opened its doors, offering entry only to those with NHS credentials to allow them to take advantage of a 50% off sale. A post on the police force's Facebook page said, "We are grateful to all businesses in the town that are following the government guidelines and have remained shut until they can reopen. Disappointingly, our officers had to close down Sports Direct earlier today after it opened a day early. We are all working together to limit the transmission of this virus, and we will continue to enforce according to the law. It's so disappointing when somebody tries to do something for those in the NHS, for example. From what I've seen, no one else was being offered entry other than those with the NHS ID, hospital staff likely being the most sanitised and least likely to be spreaders of anything. I mean, I get that they had to remain closed, but if police in Manchester can allow 2 raves to happen and do nothing until it was too late, then police in Scarborough could have let the store operate for the NHS workers before opening to the public the following day. Today should be an interesting day on the public transport services as mandatory face coverings come into force. It's been said that thousands of extra staff are being deployed to ensure that those using public transport are complying with the regulations, with those failing to comply being at risk of being fined £100 and removed from the services. Face coverings are said to be being handed out for free at railway stations across the country over the coming days, but I have to ask myself, is the policing of this new rule going to be proportionate? If someone is on the train and seen without their mask, are they getting an immediate penalty notice, or are the notices only going to be handed to those who refuse to wear them? And the reason I say this is because if someone's on public transport already without a face mask, then fining them and kicking them off would seem to be too little too late as far as I'm concerned, as the damage would already have been done, wouldn't it? What's even more confusing is that with these certain health conditions, those with certain health conditions, disabled people and children under 11, do not have to wear one. More than 2 out of 3 respondents to a recent poll of more than 2,000 people by watchdog Transport Focus said they would not be happy using public transport unless passengers were required to wear a face mask or covering. And so it seems the Master's plan is working and fear is still rampaging through society, even though practically all of the evidence seems to show it's completely overinflated. In Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales, who have stricter regulations than England throughout most of the lockdown, face coverings are not mandatory but are recommended. Face coverings can be a scarf, piece of cloth or a mask, although I'd probably suggest using your hand would be just as effective, as any viral particles are small enough to get through the gaps in anything other than medical grade face masks. So it really does seem quite pointless and is simply generating more fear and compliance by the sheeple of England. Police in Atlanta, USA are under fire after a man was shot dead during a struggle on Friday. The reason the police department is in the shit is because the man shot was a 27-year-old black American, Rayshard Brooks, who was killed in the car park of a Wendy's fast food store. The death of Brooks has fueled the flames of more protests who seem to be using any reason they can at the moment to continue their protests and, in some cases, violent and destructive behaviour. The Brooks was approached by 2 police officers who found him asleep at the wheel of his car in a parking lot. Initially, the interaction was calm, and both Brooks and the police, which is apparent in the videos released, show they were all calm and the situation appeared completely under control. However, after the breath test failed and Brooks was told he was being arrested for a crime, one of the cops started to place him in handcuffs before Brooks clearly started to struggle in order to escape. During the struggle, the police pulled their tasers and one of the cops had his taser taken from him by Brooks. Brooks then pointed the taser at the police while they were calling for him to drop it before Brooks and one of the cops disappear off camera, both pointing tasers at each other. The second cop then gets off the floor and runs off camera as well before you can hear what sounds like the click of a taser being fired before 3 gunshots ring out. I've got to be fair and honest and point out that the cop who went out of view of the camera could have been the one being tasered by Brooks, and as the cop who lost his tailor only had his gun, and that's all he had to use to defend himself and his colleague from someone who has clearly shown their intent to be violent and escape. Bearing in mind that a taser is classed as a firearm, and if the first cop had been tasered, the second cop had little choice. I don't like violence, but when you're faced with a situation such as that, I sure as hell would use whatever force I could to ensure my safety against someone who is evidently drunk and intent on getting away. In my opinion, in this instance, the police didn't have much choice, although body shots should always be a last resort and arm or leg shots should always be prioritised, as although they can lead to death, so there is less chance of death occurring than if it was a body shot. Now, there is no news on where Brooks was shot at the moment that I've found, but unlike the George Floyd incident where he was clearly complying with the police, Brooks was not, and I think people need to understand the difference. I know that Black Lives Matter has an agenda to defund police forces and to allow them to police themselves. As much as I detest most of what the police stand for today, they are still a necessity. They simply need a complete overhaul from top to bottom, as well as many of the acts and statutes that have solely been created to give police ability to abuse us repealed. But we cannot live in a society without law enforcement of some kind, unless you fancy something like the Purge happening every night. This incident has sparked calls for the police chief's resignation, and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation is investigating the incident, where its conclusion will determine whether criminal charges are to be brought against the two police involved. The alcohol level in Atlanta is 0.08. Mr. Brooks blew 0.108. Since the shooting, protests have already turned to violence in the area after the Wendy's fast food restaurant was burnt out, and at least 36 people were arrested. By racists, no doubt. Couldn't be anything to do with the fact that violence and disorder was occurring, could it? It was later reported that crowds scattered as 40 gunshots were fired from inside a car in the Edgewood district of the city. Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms said, "I do not believe this was a justified use of deadly force." So far, one of the Atlanta police officers, Garrett Rolfe, has been sacked, and the other, Devin Brosnan, has been put on administrative duty while the investigation continues. An image of an incident at a Black Lives Matter protest in Bristol has been circulating online and is being investigated by police after the image shows a masked man punching another man by the Bristol Cenotaph. This was just one of many protests that took place over the weekend and just one of many assaults that also took place. However, the mainstream media is focusing on assaults which appear to be by white men against black. But I have yet to see any reports about the violence that took place in London with videos rather than photos, which only highlight a single instant in time. Videos I have seen on Daddy Dragon's channel show how gangs of black males approached and systematically viciously attacked people in what is clearly planned violence, with reports that at least one man had his throat cut by a gang of black men and other reports that other people had been stabbed. I do not have solid information about those incidents yet though. I will link to Daddy Dragon's video in the description, where he has collected several videos, talks through what is seen, and even shows you what appears to have happened, how and by who. I'm not for one moment suggesting that all of the patriots and all of those who say they were there to protect war memorials were well behaved, because unfortunately in both camps there are agitators. But it seems whereas the mainstream media are not talking about agitators from the Black Lives Matter camp, they are all over the ones from what they are calling the far right camp. I'm not far right by any stretch of the imagination, and if I saw people damaging property that was important to me, I would try and stop them. Don't care who they are or where they're from. If it happened to be a black dude, then I certainly wouldn't be racist. The same as if I was doing the damage and I was stopped by a black person, that wouldn't make them racist. But I can understand why these terms, far right and racist, are being used by the news outlets, because it gains views. This is one of the reasons why I simply use PAP Reports and the date in the titles of my videos rather than trying to sell for views. Detective Inspector Will Thorpe of Avon and Somerset Police said, "We are investigating an allegation of an assault in reference to an incident near the Cenotaph, at 14:22 yesterday afternoon. Officers intervened and helped pull a male away from the scene who was reported to have suffered a minor injury. The male returned to the scene approximately 2 hours later and was recognised by police who had dealt with the earlier incident. On the grounds of his and public safety, they asked him to vacate the area and dispersal notice was issued. Approximately 300 people attended the protest yesterday and it was largely peaceful in nature. The crowd who answered a call to protect Bristol's cenotaph after similar memorials were vandalised in London included, it's being said, war veterans, football fans and bikers. Saturday's protest took place just yards from where the statue of slave trader Edward Colston was pulled down last weekend. Avon and Somerset police have asked people not to speculate, but yet mainstream media are allowed to print what they want, focusing people's attentions on any violence from patriots and ignoring any from the Black Lives Matter protesters. Although I'll say it again, some are agitators and are not there for the right reasons from either side. 41-year-old Merseyside Police Constable Stephen Cloney has been jailed after tipping criminals off about covert operations and planned raids which led to armed raids and a stabbing. Clooney from the Wirral apparently spent 4 years mining Merseyside Police's computer systems for information to sell to criminals after joining the force in 2007 after a spell with the Metropolitan Police. Cloney of Lawn Road, Oxton, first came under suspicion in 2017 and was given management advice and placed on restricted duties by the force. But the Force Anti-Corruption Unit continued to investigate and arrested Cloney in January 2019. Cloney was dismissed from Merseyside Police for gross misconduct in March. Judge Alan Conrad QC told him that one corrupt police officer taints a great police force and undermines public confidence in the police. If only it was just one corrupt officer. I've not yet been able to find information on the length of his sentence, but I will continue to look for that and let you know when I can. 2 Edinburgh police constables who were being investigated over allegations they had mocked Katie Price's disabled son Harvey have quit the police force. British Transport Police initiated an investigation after complaints that taunts were shared in an online chat group last July. The report was initially about 3 constables from Police Scotland, but 2 are said to have quit, which has allowed them to dodge disciplinary action. It is reported that a misconduct hearing took place in December, and at least 1 mobile phone was seized during the investigation. A video of a police constable making offensive remarks was allegedly found to have been posted by one of the accused, and the other 2 were accused of adding offensive comments. No doubt advised to resign by their Federation rep in order to not have the blemish on their work record. The names of the constables, I believe, have been withheld, as I've not yet been able to find those. Hertfordshire Police has been on the receiving end of backlash from police constables after they were warned by their superiors that failing to take the knee at anti-racism protests would see them potentially face consequences. The advice was issued during a recent operational briefing and points out that when officers kneel down, joining in the symbolic stance of the Black Lives Matter movement, it has a very positive reaction on the protest groups. Because appeasement apparently is what the police are there for now, rather than enforcing the law and protecting people and property. In fact, one senior detective has said that it's absurd. Will officers be expected to make similarly appeasing gestures at political events, far-right protests, for instance? And I don't know why people are so keen to use labels on... Oh, hang on a minute. Yeah, I do. It's to keep the public fighting amongst themselves rather than coming together as a society to fight back against the real oppressors of us all. Former Home Secretary David Blunkett said, "I'm concerned that the gesture of kneeling, though prompted by the best instincts, might give the perception of undermining the role of the police in such situations," he said last week. "They are there to ensure a safe demonstration, not to make political statements." He added that many people may have been left deeply uneasy at the sight of police kneeling before a protesting crowd, saying if they attended rallies in their own time, I would have no problem with police making symbolic gestures of solidarity with anti-racists, but it is a different matter when they are in uniform. And considering the police's code of ethics and professional standards prevents police from expressing political affiliations or views, then I think that whoever at Hertfordshire Constabulary suggested this needs to be reprimanded. But let's face it, it's not going to happen, is it? Hertfordshire Police said of the kneeling advice, officers working at events involving the Black Lives Matter movements are free to demonstrate their personal support by taking the knee should they wish. I wonder if the police joining in the LGBT marches next year will be allowed to go in PVC mankinis to show their support. The force has not sought to either encourage or discourage this action, which remains a personal choice. But unfortunately, while in uniform and on duty, it's not a personal choice, is it? I've got no issues with anyone taking part and showing their support for anything they believe in their own time. But just like the police getting involved with the clap for carers and turning up en masse outside hospitals, breaking social distancing rules while punishing others who were doing the same, or the NHS making TikTok videos while they should have been and were supposedly overrun, it should be a personal choice in their personal time. These people are supposed to be completely impartial, but yet are afraid of the calls of racism if they fail to follow the narrative. Besides, the Black Lives Matter movement actually want to defund the police, which would see them all disbanded anyway. So why are the police so keen to show their political side in favour of this is completely beyond me. A BLM activist told LBC the other day that the movement wanted the police defunded and that we should all police ourselves, but in the next breath he told a story of how 2 young black males were cornered by a gang of white males but were saved by the police. Makes absolutely no sense. And although I fully agree that people shouldn't be dying at the hands of the police, or anyone else for that matter, and that discrimination is certainly a thing that needs dealing with, I still believe that these things apply to us all, and we should all be working together to fight the blanket discrimination and not making claims that some groups should be treated differently from others. Now, I'm afraid that tomorrow will be void of a PAP Reports for personal reasons, but I will be back on Wednesday with more. Big thank you to channel Patreon supporters. Your support is truly, truly appreciated. And that's all I have for you today. Please like, share, comment and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts, as I know many of you will. And until next time, stay safe, look after each other, film the police and other officials.
Good night, all.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you like the content and you'd like to help support the channel, you can do so. In the description of every video there are some links to ways that you're able to help support the channel so I can continue putting out content. If you're unable to help us in that way, hit that subscribe button up the top there. If you haven't already, become a subscriber. That is support enough. Share the videos, comment, like, it all helps. If you're looking for something else to watch, up top there is my latest video. Down the bottom there is a video that YouTube recommends for you.